So first of all, TJ, I want to say congratulations on getting elected to be Mayor Pro Tem for a second term. I tell you what, I'm excited, proud, and tickled to death to have the opportunity to work with you in that capacity over the next year.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it. We finally get us a year together with a new manager.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk about that because that's created a lot of conversation in the community for sure.
Yeah.
And I didn't really quite give it the pause that it needed, but by that time in the meeting, quite frankly, I was exhausted.
That's it, man. Most of the time, that's how it plays out.
That's right. That's right.
Yes,
That's
sir.
right. At some point, just trying to get a buzzer. But anyway,
That's
I think we need to celebrate you a little bit more and all the work that you do in that capacity. I don't think folks fully appreciate the responsibility and the phone calls that we're making, the conversations we're having to try to just shape it into a meeting that can be productive.
Yeah, it's a full-time job for sure. Full-time job.
Amen to that.
Yes, sir.
So anyway, I thought it was a good meeting. I got to tell you the truth. I told my wife when I got up on Monday morning, I said, baby, here's the thing. If I'm home by 10 p.m., I'll be shocked. And so don't go waiting for me to do whatever you got to do. If you go to bed.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, much to my surprise, I was home by 8:38, which was incredibly, early. And we have many meetings and we're not home before 9.
That's it.
That I really don't expect to last that long. But anyway, we had a couple of really good things, right? We were able to celebrate Miss Ruth Anderson Smith on the occasion of her 100th birthday. And, small things like that make a difference. And, and think about that, 100 years, the change that woman has seen in her life. I mean, I can't even begin to fathom.
Man, a true pioneer, man. When you talk about pioneer, 100
feels
years.
Like it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And a founder for her sorority,
right?
She's a part of is actually from Rocky Mountain as well, Anna Esther Brown. So, it's just beautiful history, man. And then, being able to celebrate 100 years. We have to celebrate that.
Absolutely.
Yep. She deserves a day.
Absolutely, she does. And that's probably just a taste, just a start, And of course, we got a chance to celebrate John Bevan and a number of years that he's worked with the city and has done many, many things, for 25 years. And I guess, when you step down, you finally get at least some acknowledgement. But there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Man, that's it, man. 25 years serving on boards, man. That's it's great service. So we appreciate it, Mr. Bevan.
Really is. Yeah. So then we had the consent agenda, which was pretty straightforward, but we pulled out item I, which really dealt with the enterprise fleet management. And that's something you had really kind of worked to bring to the table in conversation. Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and kind of how that whole thing works, and then I'll try to break down maybe some of the arguments, and we can discuss it together.
So it actually formulated from one of our conferences that we attend, as council members, which is the beauty of some of those conferences, to be able to network with other agencies that can help provide support to municipalities. And I met their team. It was a great, introductory meeting. Of course, they sold themselves, as anybody else would. But their maintenance and management style is pretty much just takes, some of the work off of us. It allows us to be able to place areas of focus in other areas. When we looked at our priorities, we've looked at housing, affordable housing, we look at public safety, and all the priorities we have in the city, even after the ARPA meeting, none said anything about maintenance or management of vehicles.
Did not.
And so if it's not a priority and we can find a cheaper source to outsource that, and still have an MWB participation requirement tagged along to it, it's a win-win, a win-win for us. And so it was an untraditional type of deal, I think, according to just city history and municipality history for us, but it's done all across the state. They have other municipalities that they work with. And so overall, man, I think it's going to be successful, and I'm looking forward to the partnership and relationship.
Oh, I think so too. And this is not to say that we believe that our maintenance division is doing a poor job, because I think the contrary is true. Yeah, we are talking about light vehicles. We're not talking about the buses. We're not talking about the dump trucks. We're not talking about the heavy equipment that Michael Shaw and his team do such a brilliant job of managing and making sure that it's roadworthy for us on a day in, day out basis. So
exactly.
I want to make that small distinction, but if you're listening and you're not really familiar with it, that might get lost in the translation.
Yeah.
And, the other thing that I think was that Peter had brought forward that really encouraged him to recommend that we move forward with the contract was that it allow us to kind of catch up on some of the aging fleet that we have. Really what we're doing is we're leasing these vehicles from Enterprise, and Enterprise is maintaining those and managing those as, miles, changing the oil, all those things that they're able to do because they have the size and scope and scale.
Mhm.
And we pulled it off the agenda, and Councilman Blackwell, raised a couple of issues contrary to why he thought maybe we shouldn't consider it, or at least maybe delay it. And that really was that this is sort of a new way of doing business. He didn't feel like we had an adequate time to really analyze it as a council, and also indicated that it really was more of an ask for a delay. That was my sense of it all.
Yeah.
And I really
Yeah.
appreciated his points. I thought that he fleshed them out pretty well, and he was echoed in that sentiment by Councilman Knight. But at the end of the day, when the vote came in, it passed by my count 5-2, and I think that it's an appropriate thing. Regardless, if it doesn't work out, we can always reverse it, right? This is not like it's a 10-year contract that's ironclad or anything of that nature. So,
Exactly.
but I have used Enterprise for vehicles in past experiences in companies that I've been part of, and I have found them to be a reliable source, and I have found them to be really good at doing what they do.
Yeah, definitely. And I respect Councilman Blackwell's opposition to the item.
Of course.
But it's just it's an untraditional way of getting it done.
Right.
It's not to say it's the wrong way, but it's something that's not traditional. And so I'm looking forward to it. And we're some traditions are good, and some traditions are not so good. And so
nothing wrong with trying new things to try to create better outcomes. And to the extent that that isn't achieved, then we'll back up. But I believe fully that it will move forward. But
cheers to innovation.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And the other thing we had, really the big component, or I should say, not component, my fear in terms of the big suck in time was going to be the public hearing regarding the annexation of about 67 acres of land out on West Mount Drive. I don't think you can be in Rocky Mount now, at least not know something of this conversation, right? But it belongs to Word Tabernacle Church, and they're asking to be annexed into the city of Rocky Mount. And part of that is, at least I hope, that I guess we will consider rezoning at some point in time to accommodate some uses that Pastor Gilliard has indicated that he sees vision for the church, and so on and so forth. And there are a number of members of the community in Westmount that don't want it. They feel like it's going to change the character of this area that they've lived in all their life, multiple generations. Really resistant to the notion of this may just change the fabric of who we are as a community. And so, I thought a lot of good points were raised in it. And, the other thing I'll say is I thought everybody was very respectful. I didn't really feel like that this was one of those things that was an angry, spirited, mean-spirited conversation. It was just really point for point for point for point. And I really appreciated that. And I'll say the same is true for the representation that Word Tabernacle had at the meeting, and even the correspondence that the church has presented to council. I thought all of them just well laid out.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know what your thoughts were on all that.
Well, to your point, very respectful manner from both sides, from opposition and for support. I think there was only one individual for support that was actually a member of the church, but the church has done great work. I'm a fan of the work Word Tab has done, in the community. And again, this is another situation where we're looking at a traditional item, looking at an untraditional type of new perspective, or possibly, definitely a new outcome if it's approved. And so, I'm appreciative of the public hearing, though, because it shows that there are people engaged. And so, as much engagement as we can get into the city, the decision will be a decision that we will eventually have to make at some point. And to your point, everything was respectful. Everything was nice. Once the decision is made, someone's not going to be happy, whichever way you turn.
That's always the case.
That's it.
Well, I've always heard that really good decisions, nobody's happy.
Yeah, that's it.
Everybody's unhappy with it.
That's it.
But just to kind of break down the arguments opposed to this was that the city of Rocky Mount might actually have too much land in satellite. So what that means is that any municipality can't have more than 10% of their core land mass that's not contiguous to the city. So I've actually run those numbers, just got them today. I haven't even had a chance to share them with you. But we have less than 1% of the city's land mass that's considered satellite. So it's not even a full percentage,
Okay.
which gives us a capacity of another, we'll call it 9%. Let's just round it up.
Yeah.
We have basically 3 satellite areas. The biggest one would be the Gold Rock area, and that would represent the largest piece and part of that. The other was that, we have not considered as a city, or we should consider as a city, the financial impact that was going to have. We would have to have some obligation to continue to pay for volunteer fire services that they have out there as a community. There's some debt that we would be required to pick up some, and that part of the feasibility study was incomplete, particularly as it related to running sewer lines. And we already run water and electricity out to the community in Westmount.
Yeah.
So those are the primary arguments against it. And that the land's currently not zoned for the items that the church are trying to do. And I don't really know the plans, but I'm going to tell you what I've heard. I don't know if it's true. I've been in an RV park, maybe outside services and amphitheater. It feels like those, a restaurant perhaps, or some of the other items that are mentioned that are not currently included in the zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Arguments for it, or, well, look, there's a restaurant less than a mile away on the corner. There's a cable company less than a mile away from the location. That it really doesn't change the nature in terms of whether it's commercial or not to the community as a whole. Of course, there are some large tracts. There are people who live there, and it's sort of a rural feel to it. But still, it's consistent with the other operations that are occurring out there, and that the city's already providing water, and to be able to provide some sewer would be of some benefit to the community, and that it would create an increase in tax base. And then, of course, there's some argument in terms of the not-for-profit status of the applicant. Regardless, the city of Rocky Mount can't forcibly annex anybody to do anything. We have to receive a petition. This is a willing applicant who's making a petition to be included into the city. And so what we've done, you and I've talked about it and others, is that we're really doing a real review on this to try to understand the financial feasibility, to understand if there are any legal pitfalls or challenges, so that we can make a decision as a council with all the facts in front of us and make as objective a decision as we can possibly make. And of course, I think it should be said, and I'm sure this is a little bit of an unpopular position for some folks, but if you are the city of Rocky Mount, why would you not always default to annexing somebody who wants to be annexed into your community?
Yeah.
As I would think that is typically your default.
Yeah.
And of course, that'll remain, because we haven't really even discussed this as a council. We haven't had any kind of closed session. We've had a few sidebar conversations, but not what I would consider a robust, real conversation with any kind of polling around to see where people are sitting on the issue. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Definitely, man. And it's potentially going to sit in my ward if approved. And so I will approach it the way I approach any ward decision, and I first pray about it, and then I talk to constituents, and then I do my research, then I talk back to constituents now that I've done my research, and then I pray again, and then I get to the table and make the decision. So, so that's my process for anybody looking.
Well, and I think that's great. I think that's appropriate. I really do.
Yep. So looking forward to have some conversation with constituents, and just like everything, man, this too shall pass, and we'll move to the next item, next agenda, and we'll be faced with this challenge, as this is what we do as public servants.
That's right, and of course, just trying to make right decisions for everybody involved to the extent that we can make everybody happy. We try.
That's it.
So then, of course, we talked about consideration for some demolition of property. So this has been something we've been talking about. Gosh, it feels like the 3 years that I have been on council.
Yeah.
We just haven't really done it, I don't think, more than once or twice, but we had a list of about 10 or 12 properties that have gotten to the place that demolition needs to occur. And I shouldn't say I'm excited about it, but at some level, I'm glad that we're at least making some movement in a direction that I think will clean up at least the way things look.
Yeah. This is the largest demolition list we've seen in our 3 years.
I know that's true for us.
And a couple of the actual one of the properties has a little bit more meat on it, as there's a potential developer looking to make some development improvements on the
Well,
home.
we have a guy who's done some improvements, at least
Yeah.
cosmetically, right? So he's got some money in the ground. He's on the list, and I mean, let's just call it what it is. I mean, he
Yeah.
feels like he's in a hard spot, and I get it. And of course, we've tried to make some positive movements for him, and basically asked, just can you put up a bond? Can you do certain things? And then let's just move it off the list, and you have a timeline to finish the development.
That's it. That's it. Man, overall,
Yeah,
I think constituents are going to generally be happy seeing that these homes are demolished
that's
and
right.
there's potential for redevelopment, or,
Right.
more land usage. And so
Right.
I'm glad to see them on the list.
Sure. Right. Well, I am too. And again, and if we have somebody who is really going to redevelop it within a reasonable timeline, I'm
Yeah.
super supportive of that too. I believe everybody is.
Exactly. And I think they have until the 31st of
Something
January.
like that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm understanding as well. And then, of course, we go through, kind of typical standard stuff. But, the really big issue of the night was the confirmation of Keith Rogers as our new city manager.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he's a fellow that I'm excited. I believe he's going to do a good job for us. I'm excited to have him come here. I was, anyway, just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, man. Something that really blew me away was during his psychological and social emotional leadership style testing.
Right.
There's an abbreviation for that out, but I don't want to, be too above the heads of the
Right.
public. But basically, a test to test psychologically, socially, emotionally where you are as a leader and where you stand. And Keith Rogers was top tier among leaders in the nation,
Sure.
according to his testing. And so when we look at Rocky Mount and our potential to grow, our potential to develop, our potential to develop a downtown, neighborhood, community, I mean, it seems that we've picked the right guy for the project.
I believe we have a man who has a skill set, and I believe that we need to support him. I will say, I was listening the next morning to a local morning show, and I was disappointed to hear the amount of pushback as it related to the appointment of Mr. Rogers. And the criticisms really went like this. One, there was a feeling that the process was not transparent.
Mm.
Two, they feel like that the individual that we selected had been a manager of too small of a town, and they felt like this was history kind of repeating itself in several ways. And so I called into the show and said, "Hey, look, guys, I think that first of all, the process really can't be transparent."
Yeah.
And this is going to sound terrible, but it can't, right? These people all have jobs. We had 5 people apply.
Yeah.
From all over the country. We interviewed every single one of them. We scored them. We came up with our short list. We came up with the final, but nobody wants to have their name disclosed until they've been appointed.
That's it. That's it.
Right,
Everyone has a contract. Everyone has a previous employer.
That's it.
And this is not a situation where it's like an election. This is a hire. And you don't want to hire someone or even have conversation about hiring, and they're fired from another job without even having a solid placement of employment. And so,
Well, it's certainly not the right thing to do by everybody in the story. The other thing I said is, the last thing you want to do, even if you could do that, right? Even if that were practical and possible, you don't want to create this feeling of like Survivor Island, right? Let me pick my candidate, you pick your candidate because I don't know, they look good on TV or
that's it.
Whatever criteria you decide you bond with that individual, because it's really not a contest. It really is something that you have to trust that your elected officials are making right decisions.
Yeah.
And what I said, if you want somebody to blame if this doesn't work out, well then blame me, blame members on council because we made the decision. But let's not presuppose what this individual is going to do. Let's judge him on what he does do, not what we're scared he might do or might not do.
Yeah.
And so we had to go through that little piece and part a little bit. And the other thing is, he is coming from a much smaller town than Rocky Mount, much smaller. I mean, 6,000 or less. But he spent 10 years in the city of Richmond in various fairly high-level administrative positions, overseeing things like utilities, overseeing road, overseeing many functions that happen in a much, much larger market than where we had. And his current job or his previous job was his first opportunity to be the man at bat, right? I mean, his first head coaching job, we'll call it. And
Yeah.
so, I think that's important to note. So I think we're going to have a good man who is fairly young, energetic. I think that's important too.
Yeah.
We have a lot of holes in our staff. I don't think folks really fully appreciate that. But we have Peter, who's awesome. But it's not really the role of the interim manager to try to plug holes in spots for somebody who might come in after him in 6 or 8 months, And
That's it.
so he's been kind of holding it, maintaining it. But this guy's got a lot of work to do to find. Let's just start with the finance officer.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
have one.
That's it. That's it. And that's going to be huge, making sure that he has the support to build his team. As a leader with a team, you're only as good as your weakest link in your team. And so
That's
you're only
it.
as good as the team you have. And he's a delegator. He's not one that micromanages according to his studies and to
Right.
his interviews. He's young, he's energetic. And I think the hope for Rocky Mount is when you have someone that is a tad bit younger, they have room for change and an opportunity to look at change. The older you get, the less likely you are to really look at change. And we're in a world that's constantly changing. So for the city of Rocky Mount, I think we're going to look back 5 to 10 years and say, hey, you guys did the right thing.
Well, and I want to point out too that Bill Batchelor, who's regarded as one of the most influential city managers in City of Rocky Mount's history, got the first job when he was 28 years old, as I understand it.
There you have it.
So his first term as city manager, he was 28 until he was, maybe late 30s. And then he came back, I think, in maybe his 40s and finished up in his 50s or whatever. I don't know exactly, but that same guy produced a succession of city managers. Steve Raper, Charles Penny, produced the likes of Ann Wall, and built a lot of the part of the culture that we have here in the city, at the city. And I'm not going to tell you every single one of those things is perfect or great, but it has worked reasonably well for us for a long period of time.
That's it. It created, like you said, a foundation for us to say, hey, we've got something to build on.
Right.
And it's constantly, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Constantly building, constantly moving, constantly growing, and making sure that we're able to adapt with the changes of the world, because we got to look at it for our children, our grandchildren, and our grandchildren's children.
That's it. Well, I mean, it's not about me tomorrow. I mean, look, my deal's kind of already set. It's going to be what it's going to be. And if I get another 30 years on the planet, then, I will consider that to be a great blessing from God.
That's it.
So I'm playing for, for a different set of outcomes than I am for hopefully my children and their children at some point. But anyway, I think we've got a good man. I'm excited. He won't start until March 6th. I'm sure that sometime after the holidays, he and Peter will have an opportunity to connect and maybe start meeting some folks in the community as he transitions down here. Yeah. And I'm excited to have him. I'm excited to have somebody that is going to be full-time, that is going to be able to move forward. And, we'll just see where this all takes us. But I do really ask anybody who's listening, anybody who has an open mind, that it's very important that we provide all the support we can for him and for the community as a whole, because that's just what we've got to do to get to the right place.
That's it. It makes it a lot easier for anyone coming in. If they come in supported, that helps out. So
anyway, so that's it. And so stay tuned. Maybe we'll have a chance to get him on this show. Yeah. Introduce him to folks and kind of out there. So that was the guts of our council meeting. We really only have a couple of minutes left, but the committee of the whole was pretty full too, brother. And so you of course managed that whole meeting and set the agenda, and we covered a lot of ground. Yeah, man. The committee of the whole was it was pretty extensive. I think we left off one agenda item that we'll come back to later down the road. But some of the highlights were, looking at the police report and seeing crime continue to decrease. We've hats off to our chief and to his staff, the men and women that are there, and all of our public safety officials. The downtown policy for major incentive grants as we're looking for development downtown. I know I made the comments about trying to have a downtown development plan as well as our overall city comprehensive plan. So I'm looking forward that we'll have that, worked on and set and updated in the upcoming year with our new manager. So it's exciting times. Well, let's just talk about that in the context of where we have our staff. I mean, I believe that we absolutely need a comprehensive plan for the city, and that includes all different kinds of components. But we don't have a finance manager, where you don't even have a full complement of assistant managers.
Yeah.
And you don't have a permanent manager. You really don't have the resources to be able to lean on to help us with such an ambitious project,
Yeah.
which I think is a necessity. We really got to do that in order to be able to be successful, be able to map the course that we want to map. But here again, we're going to have to understand that we need to probably step back a little bit over the next year to 18 months and call it the rebuilding year. I mean, you hear that over and over and over in sports, but it really is true. And I think that, I think we just need to understand that as a community.
That's it. I mean, I'm excited about where we're headed and looking forward to a lot of great things and a lot of development. If you look around, there are shovels, there are cones, there are bulldozers, and so the city is growing.
Yeah, well, and the other thing that we mentioned, that, particularly in downtown, you brought that up. We have potentially 3 or 4 projects that represent, I heard, I think $40 million. I'm not sure if that's true, but at least 20.
Yeah.
At least $20 to $30 million in improvements, capital improvements downtown. And how does the city help in providing some catalyst for that, be it grants, be it, working with various contractors. And I think that we had a really good discussion, or you led a really good discussion on what that process needs to look like. And I'm excited to see what Peter and staff come back with in terms of recommendations, but I'm excited about it.
Definitely. They should have that ready January. So we're looking forward to that. And today we were just awarded $800,000 for the Main Street grant. So, it's $800,000, that's an increase that we have to leverage. And so,
that's right.
It's exciting times.
But we received the $850, right?
That's it, man.
So,
glad to have it.
Well, absolutely. And, and again, and I hear a lot of people talk about, and I just want to add this, why do we keep spending money downtown? Why do we keep spending money downtown? And I agree that if you look at it just from a purely economic return, that maybe there doesn't seem to be the impact. But I'll challenge this. People want to live in a city that's got a vibrant downtown.
Yeah.
They want that. They may not go there every single weekend. They may not go there every single night, but people want to have that downtown hub filled with energy.
Yeah.
And so I think it matters greatly, because one of the things that people do, one of the things that I do when I go to Newtown, I want to go downtown, check it out, see what's going on. And I think that we are steadily getting there. I think there's been great improvement. I believe that this has been a 20-plus year project for the city. So, this is not something that's new. It's been steady, and we've got to continue to mount that, make it happen. And we're getting there, but again, I just, people talk about that. And I just really feel like I want to challenge folks to say, look, that makes an impact. It does make an impact.
Well, and we took an untraditional, again, there it is again. We took an untraditional approach to our development. Most downtowns, they start with infrastructure they have.
Right.
We have a brand new facility in the event center, and we're pretty much evolving around that. And so we took an untraditional approach, sort of working backwards a different way. But I think we'll still get to the same point.